This meeting is now, damn, I got it wrong. It's not, whatever. It's the Q&A. Dr. James, still getting used to this new Zoom shit. Dr. Mike, how's it going?
Good. Zoom now notifies us when we're being recorded with a pleasant yet robotic female voice. I guess that's because that one CNN guy was tugging at the old windpipe.
That's right.
The old meat flute.
I wish you could change the voice. Like, you know how in like Waze, you can like have like an Australian guy like, oh, you fucking cunt, meeting started.
Oh, fucking meeting, yeah.
Put that wank meat away. All right. Folks, we're here to answer your questions. The YouTube sorting algorithm did not help Dr. Mike or I today. We struggled before the show started. But we'll get through it.
The top comments are like the top 5 comments have 0 likes. I'm like, according to who? How the fuck does this thing work?
So bear with us if we're searching around a little bit today.
Oh, let us begin. So our first commenter, questioner, is James, just go to find, because this shit is not.
Oh, I already got it open. I'm ready.
Okay. NECU.
Neku. Oh.
Yeah. Word up.
Neku Rakako se zovan.
You know what I'm saying? Whatever that means.
Kako.
Serbian or some shit.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. Oh. Boom. In parentheses, according to science, Naku asks, is it really true that a 33 calorie surplus, kcal surplus daily, is enough to build / maximize muscle growth, or do we really need 250 calories daily for 1 to 2 pounds of muscle gain per month? How far can we build strength if we are monthly gaining least amounts of muscle mass, since neurological adaptation is what majority of strength training is about? So is it really true that 33 kcal surplus daily is enough to build / maximize muscle growth? Probably. Yep, probably very close to that. Do we need 250 kcals per day extra? No. However, James and I have harped about this for a very long time. You actually can't generate a 33 kcal surplus, just like you can't take a needle out and hit one part of an atom and not the other part, because you don't have that level of precision. You have no idea what the hell's going on. If you think you're safe at warp, you're wrong. As a direct quote from Star Trek. And if you think you can track to less than 50 calories a day, you're wrong, and here's why. As a few folks in the fitness evidence-based community have noted, food portion sizes are usually off by dependably around 5 to 20%. Even if it's 5%, 5% of a 2,000 calorie diet is 100 calories a day, right? If my math is right, you're already off by that, / you don't know if you're off by that. So here's a scenario for you. You think your maintenance is 2,000 kcals a day. First of all, you don't even know if that's true. It could be anywhere between 1,900 and 2,100. You would know being on the wiser. And you go, okay, I need to eat 2,033 kcals per day. And you quote unquote do that. You have no idea if you're doing it or not. You can write it down on a piece of paper. And then for 1 month, they've done some kind of weird, metabolic radioactive tracer study on you. And they're like, good news, bad news. You were actually hypocaloric almost every day this month, and you lost 2 pounds of fat and gained almost no muscle. You'd be like, what the fuck? But I was over by 33 calories. And they're like, you don't have the precision to detect that. What you need to do is make an effort to have a distinct, definite surplus that is like, at the very least, for sure, a surplus of some kind. And roughly 250 kcals per day is, maybe it's 150, maybe it's 250, something like 200 is the lowest James and I, as fitness professionals, would dependably think someone could actually hit. So do you need to go 500 kcals per day or 1,000 over? No, of course not. But 33 is some old bullshit that anyone who says they're doing doesn't have the precision to actually conclude, James.
Yeah, 100%. Love the Star Trek joke in there, by the way. Yeah, so we use that 250 because we know that 250 is going to move the needle in the right direction, right? That's really the only reason. Whereas like anything less than that, it's kind of And not so Mike mentioned like portion sizing tends to have measurement error, but not to mention like your actual devices, like even if you're using a food scale, that has its own measurement error built in as well. And it gets multiplied throughout the day every time you eat another meal that you use it. Now, generally, you'd say like on average, the errors kind of wax and wane in both directions, but you know it's going to be off consistently in some way. So
I
at
got
that
another
point,
one, James, real quick. I got
oh
another
yeah,
one.
do it.
Daily activity.
Oh yeah.
Can you imagine you're at like you're in high school and you're trying to gain weight and you're dancing with the girl of your dreams and you're like, oh, okay, I gotta go sit down. She's like, why? You're like, I'm over my daily steps. I'm like, what? Okay. Like,
Yeah. And
you
I
accidentally walk by the aisles, the Apple aisle at the grocery store, and you have to walk back. That's 33 fucking calories right there, man. Walking across the store.
Yeah, and my step counter is on my wank hand, so it gets thrown off depending on how much I wank, right? Like at that point,
Don't
yeah,
burn calories though. Maybe
it's
not
like,
as much
dude,
as stepping.
20,000 steps, you're the man. I'm like, for sure.
I'm morally pathetic.
I can eat a lot more. Nope, just need more Gatorade at that point. But yeah, so 250 is just gonna for sure get you going in the right direction. Could you be gaining muscle at a lot less than that? Sure. Could you be gaining muscle with even more than that? Yes, but you might not need to. So it's kind of one of those things. When you are consistent with the things that you eat day to day, like I'm not saying you always eat the exact same things, but most people, like if they're doing this kind of diet life stuff, you kind of have the same. You have your chicken, you have either your bagels or whatever carbs you like to use, like rice. So if you're having those generally the same foods every day, it's easier and easier to kind of get to that level of precision in which you might not have to go as high. You know, like, okay, if I always eat 50 grams of rice, maybe I can increase it to whatever. But yeah, if you're starting off and you're having a hard time gaining and you're not pushing it up to like 250, that might be time to think about increasing your calories a little bit.
Yeah, we could see a very related question, not by Neku himself, but someone else is like, I'm gaining, I've got a 33 calorie surplus, but I'm not gaining. What gives? And James and I would roll our eyes completely around 360 in our heads.
Totally.
All right. Up next is a gentleman named Only Sam.
Sam.
The YouTube account.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I got you.
Me name's Sam. Sam I am, and I
always think of like Lord of the Rings, Sam.
Samwise.
I always go down a spiral too, because then I think of when that actor who played Sam, he was also on an episode of SVU where he was like the creepy camp counselor guy.
Ooh.
Yeah.
It's rough when you can't unsee the character.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Or if it's I forgot what his name is. He's one of my favorite actors. I don't even know his name. It's the guy who played General Zod in Superman. I will find him.
Oh yeah.
I will find him. That guy's the fucking man, and then everything he touches is pure gold. But I can't unsee him as Zod. So like he's in the movie where he's in Afghanistan shooting people. I'm like, just use your Zod powers, you motherfucker. What are you using guns for?
Yes. Or now with Josh Brolin, like you can't unsee Thanos, right? Like just Thanos.
But
from
he's
this
pretty
point
much Thanos in real life, anyway.
Yeah.
Dude, do you remember that Superman movie relatively well?
Yeah, I remember what I really liked. That particular scene had kind of like that Star Trek Khan-esque, where it's like so intense. It's like such a small part of the movie. It's like, just a blip in terms of the movie, but it's like so vivid and intense. You totally can empathize with the person, even though he's the bad guy.
100%. I would, if I was one of the guys sentencing, I'd be like, well, we better kill that guy, because if he gets out, he seems very upset. He seems like bad.
He's also a bad motherfucker.
For sure. Dude, remember that one chick that was like fighting Elliot from SVU, and she's all like, a good death is its own reward, or whatever.
Oh, yes.
That bitch. Dude, if I was him, I'd be like, yo, girl, enough talk about death. Let's talk about life. Let's talk about you and your fucking body and your ooh. You know what I'm saying? We can make interplanetary love right here, right now. We could be the first.
I can't believe
Superman hit it already.
I can't believe we both like made an SVU reference across those examples.
Yeah.
How did we converge on SVU as like a common thread?
Just happened to be an SVU. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a weird coincidence.
In any case, Sam, sorry I didn't lay your question so much. When Milo does the show notes for this, he's going to be like 3 minutes through 6 minutes. Mike and James talk about Star Trek and Superman and that one girl who's super hot that apparently Mike wants to bang. Like, I just want to show her that on Earth we don't have just violence, we have love.
Yeah, it'd be sweet if you both could get sunshine powers, and then like super bang,
1000%.
right? Like, what would that be like? Just new universes being created from all the energy?
Yo, at least you'd have to smoke a fat cigarette after that one. And say
Something
an
that,
extra lot of nothing. You know, when that shit, when the sex is so good, you got nothing to say. You just both sit there and you're like,
yeah.
yeah.
Or sometimes I'll be like, I'm gonna go work out or do something else. Just like,
I took a lot of pre-workout. This doesn't zap me.
this
I
was
need to go
a
do
warm
more
up.
stuff. Or actually, more accurately, James, for you, you'd be like, "Do you want to do this again?" She's like, "Yeah." You're like, "Right now?" She's like, "What?"
That actually does come up a lot. Where I'm like,
Physically
want to do it again? And I
impossible.
was like, get out of here, you freak.
Oh, wait. Yeah. Sam, apologies again. He says, in your video/interview, Mike, on dieting for endurance versus strength / hypertrophy versus health, you say essentially that total eating volume per se is somewhat negative for health, longevity, for stress on the cells or something in effect. Yes, yeah, the more you eat, the less long you live. My question is, does this imply people with slower metabolisms, i.e. with relatively lower maintenance calories proportional to body size or the like, have an advantage with regards to health, longevity? Yes. And assuming they eat accordingly and don't get fat and health complications of that? Yes. Yeah, 100%. 100%. One of the slowest metabolisms you can ever monitor is like that of a turtle. They live goddamn forever. Some shit. There's like turtle as old as Ben Franklin and shit. They're like, they asked him who Ben Franklin was and what he was like. He was like, oh, it was whatever. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably some sweet spot there. Cause like if you are a slow burner, so to speak, you probably might not live the like most rigorous lifestyle either. So there's health, complications of just being less active, things like that. There's probably some middle ground where maybe you don't need to eat a ton, but you're still living like a physically active lifestyle and
Good physically
exercising.
active life, but not one in which the optimal health and longevity comes from good, decent amount of physical activity. But if you're training for ultra marathons and shit, you're already going to live less long because you're burning through your shit too fast. Which is, it's a thing. But then again, it's quality of life versus longevity. Like the best way to live a long time is to essentially be a monk. But like, being a monk, like, let's talk about the downsides. No porn. And at that point, I'm out.
Yeah. No, I mean, and hard stop, done.
Like, hey, I wanted to go to this retreat. You guys have porn? They're like, no. I'm like, oh, nice.
You got to get like your monk VPN so you can watch porn secretly, but you're basically not a monk at that point.
No, they do that. No, I love meditation. I'm Zen and shit. I just need, fuck hub or porn.
Porn fuck or fuck videos or
fuckvideos.gov.
Ooh. That's the last thing we want is like government subsidized pornography.
God, it'd be awful.
It'd be awful. It would just be all consenting the whole time. Before they did anything.
Let us have sex. James, next up in our list is, let me make sure I get this right. Oh, it's Vasil Relief.
Remember how to spell Vasil right? Oh, I do. Got it.
Vasil Relief. Relief, Relief is in Russian, it translates roughly to have sympathy for someone or pity.
Ooh, is it sympathy or pity? That's kind of, is it which one?
Yeah. It's context dependent, but it's to spare someone, like spare someone's life. I pity him, but kind of in not necessarily an insulting way, kind of a respectful, but like, oh man, like someone broke their leg before the Olympics, like, oh man, like I've really just unfortunate, like really sympathize, like really sucks. Like,
more sympathy, less Mr. T, more sympathetic.
Less Mr. T for sure, but you can put a sarcastic spin on it and put it real nasty. Every Russian thing can be sarcasticized beyond absurdity.
True.
All right. So Vatil asks rather, when performing an incline dumbbell fly, is it bad if the arm goes beyond parallel in the bottom stretch position? Does the answer change if the chest is flared and the shoulder blades are tucked? I'm asking because a friend of mine is harassing me for my giant range of motion, which honestly tortures me greatly. If you do not feel that your joints are being compromised, if your force production is not decreased, like in a big way where like at really low, you feel great, and below that, you're like, oh shit, I can't even lift a half this weight. And if you don't have pain in the shoulder joint or any of the joints around, and if it's just killing your muscles, then there's not a goddamn thing wrong with any way of moving that meets that criteria. James, can you just fucking sneeze already? This is rude.
What you're doing. Killing me. Sorry. It's killing me.
Actually, it's trippy when people hold in sneezes. I can remember once I was in class when I was an undergrad, and this girl would hold in her sneezes completely, but like you could clearly tell the like intrathoracic pressure was insane. And she'd be like, "You're like, are you gonna blow up next time? You just fucking sneeze for love of God."
Ears and eyes are bleeding.
She's like, she turns red, she just passes out. You're like, I'm pretty sure that girl's dead.
Don't do that. What's wrong with you? God.
I don't even cover my sneezes. Like that.
Ugh. You ever seen those like
girl in front of me is rubbing her like snot off the back of her head? I'm like,
you ever seen those like super slow-mo videos of people sneezing?
Oh,
it's gross.
Man, really just all that stuff, huh?
Mm-hmm. I'm a mouth sneezer too. Like, it never comes out my nose. Like, it always like comes out my mouth.
You ever have to? I know this is we always get into this. We're the two grossest people alive. Just honest.
Yeah.
Do you ever sneeze while you're eating like rice or something?
Oh,
all sorts of shit comes out,
dude.
Like,
and it gets locked up in there for like half a day. The rest of the day, you're still blowing your nose, and there's like grains coming out. Oh, I've gotten ramen up my nose from doing that. It's it's spicy, and it's just fucking awful. Yeah, no. Ugh.
It clears the sinuses. All right. Next up is Wilson Mann.
Real quick too, Vasile.
Sorry.
Yeah. With those dumbbell flies, I actually think that's an advantage of doing the incline dumbbell fly. I don't know if you're like me, but like I have like kind of big scaps, like the bones are big. So like when I do flat dumbbell flies, it's a good movement for me. But that very bottom position is just kind of weird because it's just hard to get all the way into like a really good stretch position on the pad. Whereas the incline, for a lot of people, it just opens you up in a way that is hard to hit in some other positions. So as Mike said, if you can do it pain-free and you really feel like a deep stretch in the muscle and you get good soreness and good performance improvements, you just keep doing what you're doing. And I think that's actually an advantage for doing the incline fly versus the flat fly, where sometimes in that very bottom position, for some people, not all, can be just awkward to get a good stretch if you don't have a good pad set up. Like if the pad's too wide or too narrow, it can be a little goofy. So definitely do it.
Yeah,
what was the, sorry, Wilson
Mann.
Got it.
So I think we answered Henrik's question last time, but let's see if, I don't remember what the fuck it was. Piggybacking off of the answer to Henrik's question, if fast twitch fibers recover slower between mini sets in a myo-rep type set, which we do, and doing myo-reps on different exercises be a decent diagnostic for seeing which of your muscles are more slow or fast twitch dominant? Maybe, but there's so much else going on. So the same muscle can be more slow twitch, fast twitch dominant, but it can be better or more poorly vascularized, for example. It can be leveraged in such a way that allows it to have a high degree of endurance. There's like 10 trillion other things that are going on. Like faster and slower fiber types are interesting theoretically, and they're interesting to talk about. And eventually we have really good diagnostic for them. It'll be something you can really take home. But for now, we just say, like, look, it's mostly mixed anyway. It's all a mixed bag. Push your muscles hard. If you're getting good soreness, good pumps, good local fatigue drop off, then the rep ranges are going to guide themselves to the best SFRs anyway. I just wouldn't worry a ton about slower or faster types. Put you this way. If you're doing sets of 8 and a stiff-legged deadlift, your hams are fucked for 4 days. They're super sore. They get crazy pump. You can barely limp out of the gym, and you're making crazy gains on them. And then they do a biopsy, and they realize your hamstrings are all slow twitch, but you've done sets of 30 and leg curls, and they don't do dick for you. What are you going to do? Change your training to something that like doesn't
yes.
the boxes?
Exactly.
So you kind of already, it's kind of like you already know. I'll put you this way. Here's a really crude analogy. We know that folks of West African descent on average tend to be faster short distance sprinters than everybody else. Does that mean like you're going to recruit sprinters by looking at how dark their skin is, how broad their nose is? No, you're going to be like, hey, line up and motherfucker, and whoever's fast, you just take them. You'll end up with more West Africans, but it's just easier to test sprinting speed than try to take a proxy measure of like, well, what it is, and what about genetics for sprint speed? Like, just fucking run, train, whatever gives you a pump, a lot of disruption, a lot of soreness. That's probably your best bet as to what's going to grow you.
Yeah. And I'm really glad you brought that up too, because I think a lot of people get too focused on this like fast twitch, slow twitch issue, when reality is like, it's more of the SFR issue, right? Like what exercises, rep ranges, cadence, intensification techniques get you into those better SFR ranges. And I mean, you can do a couple different things if you're really curious, like just for, masturbatory purposes, like, okay,
Hey, really curious for masturbatory purposes. Wow.
yeah. So like the SFR is the obvious one. Like, okay, is your best pumps and soreness in the 5 to 10 range? Okay, that's probably a good sign. Do you feel massive fatigue drop off, like comparatively with other muscles? Like you do 2 sets and you're like, I'm fucking done on this one. That's maybe a good indicator. Does the weight on the bar tend to increase basically every week, or does it take bigger jumps, than other muscles? Yeah, that's probably a good sign. But like Mike said, it's a mixed bag anyway, and you're going to use the same methods of trying to figure out that SFR either way. So it's usually one of these things, like if you're flash twitch or slow twitch dominant in any way, already, because all of your life's activities have gravitated to what you're good at. So if you've always been strong, you're probably more fast twitch dominant. If you used to do cross country, you're probably more slow twitch dominant.
By the way, that question by Sam, we answered the wrong one. So let's just answer the right one now. And we'll just.
I was wondering. I was like, that question didn't have any of those.
There. I was like,
God,
I remember that it was different.
Sam.
And I was like, maybe I was just missed it.
Sam
asked, do longer limbed people tend to have higher rates of muscle growth than shorter limbed people? That's not the immediate assumption you would make. Now, longer limbed people generally on average tend to have an easier time stimulating growth because they can traverse such huge, like they just don't need to do as many reps because each one of the reps is more mechanical work. So it is always funny when longer limb people say like, man, I can't get my quads to grow. Like your quads have been growing for years. You're just so lanky that it doesn't look like much yet, but you keep going and they're going to be enormous. Shorter limb people fill out quicker. So it looks like they gain muscle much faster, but in reality, they're gaining probably the same amount of muscle, maybe even a little less. It's just fitting on a shorter frame. So I will say shorter people sometimes struggle to present a really good raw stimulus magnitude because the range of motion is so short, especially using a lot of machines that aren't designed for them. Tall people, for the most part, like if you're tall, you have decent genetics, stimulus is not going to be a problem. Eating enough consistently to get bigger is going to be a problem. Like James, you ever see like the tall guy effect on metabolism from surface area and from just their body weight? Like our friend Al, Al eats an inordinate amount of food. He just stays 160 pounds. Like I've actually massed him up to over 200. Heaven and earth, 7,000 calories a day in and day out. It's insane. And it's just sometimes really hard for tall guys to gain weight, and it's just not hard for them to stimulate the muscle. It's kind of
yeah, totally. I think like kind of some of the old school thought on the limb length too is that like sometimes, not always, but sometimes people who have shorter limbs have a more of a mechanical advantage on certain lifts, which allows them to lift more weights. And then the thought is like, okay, if they can lift more weights, does that translate into more muscle growth? And the answer is like maybe, but not always. So it's like the muscle growth proclivity of an individual is largely independent of the limb length in the anthropometry, at least from the best that we can tell. Now, but maybe there are some trends in that, but I certainly don't see that. I think more often than not, they're just two independent factors because there's plenty of short people who aren't super strong or aren't super jacked, you know what I mean? But like Mike said, sometimes it looks like they fill out more or this or that. So it's not necessarily like a tit for tat. Like, okay, you have stumpy arms. That means you can bench press a lot, which means you're going to have a huge chest, maybe, but maybe not also.
By the way, our next contestant, next question asker, is EIN. And what's his last name?
Ein Brown?
Yeah, Ein Brown. Perfect. And he reminds me, because it's a similar last name and it's Germanic sounding, of what is her name? Eva Braun, who was Adolf Hitler's wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I just always, whenever I see Ein Brown's name, I'm always like, this will be a new Germany with a new big eye. It's terrible, but that's just what comes from.
Yeah. I always think of the dog from Bebop, who was named Ein.
Oh, there you go.
That's like one of those funny names where somebody's like, I need like a German word. What's a word in German? They just Google search and it's like Ein. And they're like, all right.
I watched that anime at the wrong time of my life. I think I was 15 years old, and the only thing I got out of it was that one bitch with big ass titties had big ass titties.
She had big ass titties. That's not one for you. I know you. That's more of like a kind of an artsy fartsy one. That's not up your alley. I don't think you would enjoy it now.
I like the space cowboy idea a lot, but
I recently rewatched the entire thing, and I don't think it's for you.
No.
But that's okay. It's not for everybody.
When Doug was describing how amazing the saga of Firefly was. He's like, it's unbelievable. It got canceled after one season. I was like, wow, way to sell it, Doug. And he's like, that's not what I meant.
Yeah.
It's a cult classic.
Coach Tim would fucking go off about that all the time. Because there was a movie too that it was like, I forgot. But yeah, Coach Tim was all about Firefly.
I like the space cowboy shit really appeals to me. I kind of want to live on that one.
It is cool, but like a lot of the show is filled with like just awkward scenes and like jazz music.
Nonsense.
Yeah. As like I'm imagining like as soon as the jazz music, which is basically like every episode hits you, Mike's like, no, I'm out of here. Fuck this.
What is this?
What is this? Where's the cowboys and big titties?
Iron Brown says, help with mesocycle backsliding. What should I change if my progress keeps resetting itself after a deload, 7 days off from training? This only affects one exercise. My adaptations are retained for everything else. Gee, you know, that's kind of a mystery. Would say try two things. One, training significantly harder during the mesocycle. And two, try to still train during the deload, not 7 days off from training, but keep some of the neural patterning by doing 2 light days through that time just for technique, and then see if it's a nervous system issue and maybe that could resolve itself. But to be completely honest, this is one of these things that tends to stump me when people say they backslide after a deload and get weaker. It's my number one hypothesis about that is your body just really not interested in making or keeping adaptations, and you're not really progressing much. And would go back to basics, go back to the troubleshooting videos that we have on the channel, see if you're hitting all those. But other than that, it's a rough thing. You know?
I'm also wondering too, like he says backsliding, which like you and I think of like a regression, but I'm wondering too if it's like, is your performance basically stable? You know, because within using the RIR scale, like your performance might be stable, but you're doing, you know, you kept the weight the same as what you ended at last time, but now you're starting at 3 or 4 RIR. So it kind of looks like you're backsliding, but in reality is like you're actually kind of exactly where you were. You're just using a heavier weight and higher RIR. You know, could be that too.
100%. And then it's one of those, okay, so let's say he's not backsliding. Let's say he's just not getting better. That's also a fucking problem, you know?
Yeah.
And then where do you go with that? I don't know. Hashtag do better.
It's always odd too when it's just one particular movement or exercise. Like if everything else is good, that means you're fundamentally
says it's a nervous system thing.
Yeah.
Some people need more practice with the movements. I have a movement like that actually, hilariously. It's the dumbbell lateral raise. If I don't do it like twice a week and I come back to it, it feels so foreign and weird. I'm like, oh, I suck. But even if I do it really light every few days, I can go ultra heavy every couple of those days and just hit PR after PR after PR because it feels groovy. You know, nervous system thrives on repetition and high frequency. Remember, like the West Side guys used to squat like once a week. Like, what the fuck are you guys doing?
Yeah.
Now to them, they had to go so heavy they couldn't recover any sooner. But, you know, I would say try not to take 7 days off from training.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of any other recommendation. That one's good. I'd be curious to know if it's like a movement that's consistently in your program or if it's one that you kind of come on and off. That's like kind of, because then you have like the low bar squat phenomenon, which is like what Dr. Mike is also talking about. Yeah. I'm not sure. It sounds like everything else is going pretty good except for this one particular movement. And frankly, like if ultimately, even if you're backsliding or even if you're just not making any progress, it sounds like that movement might be shit for you anyway. So maybe just think of swapping it out for a higher SFR movement.
Totally. One that you can make progress on.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're always another great way to fix this would be a strong and unified Germany.
I mean, how can you make progress on your bench if your Germany is not strong and unified? You got to get your priorities straight.
Good God. We're talking about exercise of the body. We need to exercise the will of a people.
This is going downhill fast.
What do you guys think? This is what James and I do when we just hang out as friends. It's just
tangents.
Like, just tornado down into nonsense.
Just nonsense tangents.
100%. All right. Speaking of nonsense, our next question asker's name is Terak, which is EERR. And let's see where that takes us.
Get out of here. Get out of here, Zoom controls. Got it. What the fuck is his avatar?
Shopping cart?
I can't tell. I'm looking at the one below, the Klaskiana,
Yeah.
and that's like a super fat person, it looks like.
And the avatars are tough for me because if it's sufficiently like detailed image, I'm like, I don't know, it's too small, you know? I've heard
Yeah.
that. All right.
Okay, this is a fun one.
Here we go. How long should a pump last? Do pumps tend to go away more quickly after training different muscle groups in the same session? Example, quads at the start of the session, shoulders towards the end. Yes. Pumps will, so there's a lot of blood and fluid volume, and you only have so much of both. And if you get something else pumped after you have something, one thing pumped, the pump in that first thing tends to go away to some extent. Is that a bad thing? It may actually be a bad thing, because then that's one of the ways the interference effect probably expresses itself. The ideal thing to do after training a muscle is to leave it the fuck alone. Does that mean you need to be training one muscle at a time? If you're super searching for optimality and you could train 2 or 3 times every day, yeah, this would probably be your best bet. How long should a pump last? It depends on what you mean by pump and like where your cutoff point is, if it's no longer pumped anymore. I would say that there's also a difference between fat loss phase and mass phase and maintenance phase. Generally, the longer your pump lasts, the more indicative of the robust stimulus that you got. Sometimes it can mean that you did so much damage, it's probably too much. If you're still pumped like 9 hours later, you're going to be sore as fuck. And it's like pieces of your muscle floating around in there. And that's why you're pumped. It's like literally edema from injury. But I would say typically, pumps last for anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes to several hours after training, in my experience, to a less and less a small extent or smaller extent. And I think during fat loss phases, they may last as little as 15 or 20 minutes, even less. And then it's not great, but is what it is. And sometimes they may last for quite a long time, several hours afterwards. And that's a good sign that you're probably doing a lot right, and maybe a sign you're doing too much. So I would say that as long as you achieve a really big pump during the session, like right after, within the next 5 minutes when you go to the locker room to take your pictures, that's the real like gold standard. How long it lasts afterwards, there's going to be a lot of variables that affect, and ideally it lasts as long as possible without you completely fucking yourself up and doing, absolutely crazy shit and getting too sore. But now that's the thoughts on that.
Yeah, really good. And fun exercise physiology fact, folks, for those of you who haven't studied it. When you start exercising a muscle, you actually start getting preferential blood flow to and leaving from that muscle. So your body will actively start constricting to other areas and actually dilating the vasculature going to the one that's being worked. So there is sort of a time series effect there. So as you start warming up, they're kind of initiating some of those cardiac functions that are pumping more blood to that muscle. There's also what we call reactive hyperemia, which is when you start contracting hard, you start building up some metabolites, and that stimulates another vasodilation effect once the metabolites are released. So you get like a big pump from every set that you do. And so what's kind of interesting about that is you have this kind of like time series effect of pump as a result of exercise. And like Mike said, if you switch to doing something else, you have set in motion all of these things that are saying like, pump blood to the legs. The legs are working really hard right now. And then maybe you switch to something like a shoulder or an arm. And now your body's recalibrating and saying, well, we had all the flow going to the legs. Now we're actually going to constrict a little bit in that direction because the metabolic demand is now in the arms. So we got to redirect things more towards the arms, less towards the legs. And so, as he said, it's kind of an interesting conundrum when you train multiple muscle groups per day. So there's, the most hilarious and optimal way would be, as Mike said, to like just train quads, take a break, come back, train hamstrings, take a break, come back to train calves. But it's so wildly impractical. And like, what is the magnitude of that effect? We don't really know. So most people train multiple muscle groups within a session. But yeah, it does mean that you sacrifice some of the pump effect.
Yep. All right. Next up is our dear friend, Henrik Anderson, who is probably as close to a resident on this webcast as we can have, because basically gets uploaded so much all the fucking time.
He's consistently delivers good questions and upvoted questions.
I like you had a video in your recommendations that we are the weakest generation of all time.
I saw that
channel called the Warrior Poets Society. I want to be like, what's a symptom of that weakness? Poetry. You ain't hard. You a poet. Get the fuck up out of my face. Rhyme, I'm choking you to death.
My like algorithm's all fucked up because it's always like just a cacophony of unrelated things. So it's just like, here, this. Are you a man? Do you like guns and beer? Like, here's a bunch of shit.
What's funny is Greg Nuckols is like pretty squarely on the political left, And because of his friends and his involvement in powerlifting, Facebook assumes he's a like a Republican
Like
and just
alt-right
spams him
person.
like Ben Shapiro shit. He's like, "Ah."
It's so
It's
funny.
awful. Like Facebook assumes I'm many things that I'm not, but it's not that far off from me. It does give me a ton of man shit. Like, hey, you shave, right? You like Kodiak bears and bitches with tits and a steak.
Yeah,
Imagine a
exactly.
bear throwing a steak at a bitch with titties and her shaving. I'm like, I don't even know what's going on.
I get a lot of those like man targeted
Yeah.
things. Whatever.
Henrik Anderson asks, as someone that doesn't need to go to local MRVs due to training age, how do I know when to deload? If I go until I can't physically progress anymore, I'm so systemically fatigued that I'm facing several consequences such as sleep disruptions for 1 to 2 weeks before performance drops. When should I deload? Easy. When you start to get a systemic deload or systemic fatigue effect that starts to really bother you, just fucking stop then. So if you have like your appetite's down, you feel really flustered, you're clearly fatigued and sore as fuck, and also your sleep is starting to get wonky for a few nights in a row, next week starts deload. Simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they kind of answered your own question there, right? Where it's like you're when you start manifesting symptoms of systemic fatigue, that's not a bad spot. Ideally, you might be very dialed in and know exactly when they tend to start manifesting. So it might be something like week 4, I'm mostly good. Week 5, if I go to a 5th week in my meso, I start to get kind of janky. And then you say, okay, well, from now on, I finish week 4, deload on that 5th week, and then I just never quite get there. And I'm always, maybe you're leaving a little bit of time training on the table, but at the same time, your performances will be really good and you'll feel like really prepared for all of your training sessions. So that's awesome.
Yeah, you're well put. All right, next up is almost Lorenzo Lamas. I really look forward to the day that he asks a question on this, but it's Lorenzo Ojeda.
Do you think anyone ever is like somebody who knows Lorenzo, like his manager's like, yo, you get a lot of shout outs on this exercise Q&A shit.
You go on this stupid webinar thing that All right, Lorenzo asks, hey docs, I noticed that Dr. Mike is regularly doing super arm laterals with dumbbells. I just wanted to know if these can be a viable replacement for traditional dumbbell raise, and what cues leading with pinkies, how high should we go, etc. Can you give us when we want to try this particular movement? Yeah, it's easy. It's absolutely. I wouldn't talk about replacements. I would talk about variations. It's something you can do. Like rice doesn't replace pasta, but it's something you can have instead of pasta every now and again. And I would say that you can have your pinkies wherever it's comfortable. I wouldn't have your thumbs pointing straight up because that makes it a little bit more front out movement. I would say neutral. Pinkies up is okay. Sometimes it bothers the shoulders, but arms relatively straight and go up. Until you're at least past this sort of 45-degree angle. From here to here, you generate almost no force. Some people like to go all that high because it gives them a nice little rest and reset point. So you can essentially kind of doing myo-reps because here you get a little break. When you go back down here, you actually get a few more reps each set. So that's kind of cool. And if you're doing this for sport or something like jujitsu, wrestling, or tennis, I would actually go all the way up and down because it improves your mobility a ton. It's just really good for you. The way I started doing these is I was doing regular laterals and then doing another exercise altogether. I had a bit of a shoulder injury and I was like, fuck, I can't even fucking do laterals anymore. And then I was just fucking around in the gym seeing, like, you guys know, like after you get hurt, James, I'm sure you've done this before, you try to like see which way you can move that hurts and which way doesn't. And you're like,
Yeah.
how can I train around this? And all of a sudden, I kept going up with really light dumbbells, and I was like, "Wait a minute, this feels incredible! What the fuck?" So, to me, it felt really good. I would just say your number one guide is: are you feeling a pump and tension in the side delts and a burn? And also, are your joints feeling okay? And the pinky stuff and angle and all that other shit, that's just going to take care of the rest. Just make sure to lift with your shoulders and not heave ho it. So don't go like that and get the dumbbells up. And so basically, you want to get them up under your own strength, your side delts. When you're coming back down, make sure to milk that eccentric. It's a real nasty thing. Fuck you so hard in the best way possible because riding that eccentric down, when you do regular laterals, the eccentric's not that bad because after the first half of the movement, it's basically zero. Riding the eccentric down through the whole thing is awful. It takes like 2 whole seconds and it's a ton of hypertrophic stimulus. So I would say ride the eccentric down and you can use the 10s or the 15s and just get the pump of your life. Give it a shot. And remember, it's not magic. If you hate the exercise, if it hurts your shoulder, stop fucking doing it.
really, really good. Yeah. And if you are like a long-armed person like myself, that is a very humbling movement because you are feeling it all the way to the top and you're going to
You've
be using
tried
the
it, yeah,
fucking like
James?
tens. What's that?
You've tried the super arm laterals?
Oh yeah, I've done it. I kind of petered out on them after a while, so I've swapped them out for something else. But no, they're brutal, and it's one of those where it's like if you have long arms, like you can have like 3 to 4 weight increments with no difference in repetitions because it's just so fucking awful. So you can like you're using the 20s, you're like, ooh, 20s is too heavy. I can only get like 10 reps. You go down to like 15, you're like, I still only got 10 reps. You go down to like 10, you're like 10 reps. This sucks. Fuck. And one word of caution: if you don't do a lot of stuff that's kind of like overhead in that like last half of the movement, like if you haven't done any like dumbbell pressing or anything like that, I have overreached on that from going too aggressive a couple times where my delts are used to doing like the lateral part, but they really weren't used to doing that last half. And you do like maybe four sets or something. And then the next day you're totally fucked because it was so novel. So just be cautious.
Yeah, I would ease into those. They're just for a side delt movement, they have such a great raw stimulus magnitude that it's two things. Incredibly refreshing to be like, oh my God, I can fucking zap these. So side delts are hard to hit. A lot of times you do a bunch of sets of whatever seated laterals, and you're like, I don't even know if I'm training.
Yeah.
And you do like one set of super arm laterals, and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But also that really can throw you off because it's such an unusual movement. You got to really, really ease into it.
It typically is a good SFR movement for the shoulders too. Of course, it's always an individual thing, but just in this case, the range of motion is so high, the amount of load that you can actually use is just relatively low. So like
the eccentric ride is amazing.
Yeah, you can't really like fuck yourself up too bad outside of like just not progressing your sets appropriately.
Yep. All right. Ibrahim Abu Saada.
Oof, that's a tough one. Nicely done.
The double pump A. All right. During low-fat, high-carb mass phase, at what point do you believe the body might upregulate de novo lipogenesis, as studies show it is relatively subdued in normal conditions? Is there a minimum fat threshold or maximum carbohydrate threshold beyond which the body might begin to increase de novo lipogenesis, obviously based on your body weight and daily expenditure? So anytime you're in a caloric surplus, de novo lipogenesis tends to occur. So if you can do plenty of de novo lipogenesis if you are actually eating very low fats and you're hypocaloric, it'll turn some fats into or some carbs into fats. Yeah, it's a thing that happens. It just doesn't happen as easily as taking fats you're already eating and pouring them in. And so that's one of those very, very small theoretical advantages of high carb, low fat fasting. It's one of the things that on the other side of the spectrum, people like keto people say like eat fat to burn fat. Like, yeah, you stupid motherfucker, you're burning the fat that you eat, not your own body fat. So just the same way, you don't want to think high carb, low fat massing, be like, you can't gain fat like this. Like, sure can, because the extra carbs will make you put on fat. So it's really a thing. It doesn't happen as efficiently, so it's a small advantage there.
Yeah, and I don't know of any sort of thresholds or intakes, but just speaking theoretically, I would imagine that this becomes more of a thing once your like liver glycogen and muscle glycogen is relatively full, meaning like you're
it
not
will be very soon.
Yeah, and so if you have relatively full glycogen stores and your blood glucose is normal, and then you're getting like big dumps of carbohydrate, that's probably the instance where you're going to start seeing more and more fat accumulation, regardless of what you eat.
All right. Next up, James, is our final question asker.
All right.
I just saw a recommendation I have. Change your brain. Neuroscientist Dr. Andrew something or other. And the video thumbnail says your behavior.
Sweet. Get those what are those called? Nootropics or whatever?
Yeah, nootropics. I'm gonna as far as hacking my behavior means I like plug Microsoft DOS into like my brain and then like run a fucking search function while like early 90s techno plays and like a girl in a mini skirt is around like in all the hacking movies.
God damn, that really set me back for a minute. I just thought about like I was thinking about like entering the code for the Family Feud DOS game back in the day. Fuck, that's wow, set me back.
Back in the day, how far have computers come as far as as far as UI UX, like as far as user interfacing. Like right
It's
now, a
insane.
3-year-old can use a fucking iPad. Can you imagine putting a 3-year-old up to MS-DOS? Be like, all right, enter the directory you want to access to turn this
Yeah.
video game on. Like, what?
Motherfuckers,
C-//. What the fuck? What?
we had discs that you had to put into a drive, and sometimes you had to flip them the other direction. Remember those bad boys?
Amazing. I liked it when the operating system was in disk form. So you have to load that before you can do anything else. It's incredible.
God.
Like Windows didn't come stock on your machine. Your machine came with only like the assembly program, and then you would have to load in the CDs of 10 CDs to load Microsoft Windows into your computer.
I was just thinking like when the zip drives came out and it was like, you can now store like a megabyte on this disk. And now it's just like
100 megabytes. Like,
fucking,
oh my God, that's so many GIFs of porn.
Yeah. Now it's just like you have like unlimited cloud storage. It just magically goes somewhere. Before you had to have this giant disk.
Do you remember Creed, the movie Creed with Michael B. Jordan?
Yeah.
He like Sylvester Stallone really writes him a training plan on a piece of paper. And he's like, thanks. He takes a picture of it and he gives him the paper back. He's like, don't you need this? He's like, it's in the cloud. He goes, what cloud? What's up?
That was so good. It's true too. It's hard to
Right.
explain that kind of stuff to somebody who didn't like grow up in it.
Yeah. All right. Ibrahim asks, oh no, he already did. Sorry. We're on to the next guy, right?
All right. Was he the last one?
Ein Herjar K.
Wait, what?
Yeah, exactly, James. EINHER. I think that'll.
Got it.
Yeah. This is a man who desperately needs a Viking sword to make sense of his life.
Yeah, no kidding.
You were destined to have long flowing hair into the Viking mists to slaughter Neanderthals or whatever the fuck your ancestors were doing. What were my ancestors doing? Yeah, we were like in like Southern Europe bartering and giving out loans. I don't know. 2% is a lot of interest. Oh. James, your ancestors were alcoholics somewhere in Germany.
Like, yeah. Somewhere I picked up some Japanese. Depending on what day of the week I check my 23andMe, it's like, you're Japanese. No, you're not. No, yeah, you're German. No, you're not. They don't know what the fuck. Like I'm like broadly Eastern European and Irish.
Yeah. They know you're a weeb, so they fuck with you by being like, you're Japanese. And you're like, oh my God.
Yes. Got my Naruto headband on.
That's right. There was a reason I was always into Japanese girls.
I found some like super weeb shit I'll tell you about after this is over.
Is it weeby enough that you can't even talk about it on me?
Actually, I guess I can. There's like
half our fans are weeb anyway.
Yeah. I didn't realize there's like this whole subset of like it's kind of like it's like they're cartoons. It's like web cartoons. So it's like there's like whole websites of like web cartoon comics. They're not like manga, they're more cartoony, but a lot of them are from like Korea and Japan, where it's like it's just porn. It's just straight up like comic book porn. And like some of them aren't pornographic, but like a lot of them are. And they have like a thing where they'll be like, oh, there's like a couple free ones that you can read. And it gets you like right to the juicy part where they're like, oh, we're friends, but we're thinking about fucking. And it's like, there's tension. And then it's like join for like, and then you look at, there's like 400 other volumes on this series. And you're like, how much fucking is going on? I need to know. But there's like a paywall, right?
Oh,
so like, yeah.
James, speaking of paywall, I'd like to share with you and I guess the world via YouTube a dream I had last night. This is a legit dream I had.
Let's hear it.
So, in this dream, I had found a video of a porn star. I already had it. Okay, I had the whole video on my drive, and I for some reason messaged the porn star. It was like, "Hey, I found a video of yours. Is it okay if I jack off to it?" So
you need permission. Oh man,
nonsense. And then she messages back and she's like, well, actually, I'd prefer if you paid. And she sent the pay link. And I was thinking in the dream, like, bitch, I already have this shit. You just be so lucky I even asked you as a formality. But I asked her, weird dreams I never know. And then she also said, and by the way, because like, I guess the video was like girl on girl or something. And she was like, by the way, it's kind of interesting that you're using this video because here on this like interview or on this website, you wrote that you were like only approved of guy on girl love and you didn't.
Oh, she knew about you.
And I was like, And I can, like you don't have your full IQ or even close in the dream. The thing I remember thinking is, one, it's nonsense that she's asking me to pay because fuck that. And the other thing I was like, I would never write something like that. I don't believe that.
It's
So
a
the whole
deep
thing was
fake
very
AI.
mysterious.
That was an AI interaction. She
Yeah.
was monitoring your activity and like putting on like a VI interface and like, oh yeah, I'm like the porn star. That was,
They're all in our heads already, bro.
dude, that was a deep one. Dude, like a deep fake, like took images from the web, fabricated this person, and then it's like you're interacting with an AI who's like trying to get you to go through their paywall. So that's fucking Skynet. That's porno Skynet, dude.
Porn is probably one of the leading lights in VR technology.
They innovate all sorts of cool shit. Yeah.
I recently ran into this thing, again, highly off topic, but we might as well.
Milo's rolling his eyes again, just like,
half the people that watch this shit are fucking here for the bullshit anyway. Ultra conservatives, with total respect. I respect you as much as I respect SJWs.
wink.
Just kidding, guys. We love everyone. So they're like really anti-porn and like vocal about it. And I ran into this Instagram like page or series of pages where all the comments, like it was an anti-porn thing, and all the comments, like I thought it was deep irony at first. And then I realized these people were serious, like porn is disgusting and this and that. I'm just like, what the are you guys talking about? They're like, it's toxic. I'm like, really? People still say this? Like they've done every study in the world and porn doesn't do a fucking thing to you, except it probably calms you the fuck down. Like,
dude, my dick is toxic. Access, that causes me to do all sorts of stupid things, right? Porn helps create a stopgap. Joe Rogan had a bit about this. I don't remember which thing he was. Yeah, it was like, whenever you're thinking about doing some dumb shit, jerk off first and then come back to it. Because he's like, you'll always make the right decision afterwards because you're thinking with your dick, your toxic dick, right? Dude, totally agree. It's like porn never hurts anybody. Well, there
are definitely people that like they get addicted to it. There's people that get addicted to everything, man. Like on average, porn is just fine. Like TV, people get addicted to TV, watch too many shows, and
I'm definitely not where I'm not for porn where the participants don't want to be there. So I think we can all get behind that.
That's like literal abuse.
It's like slavery.
That. Like most so that's bad. They're getting paid really well, I might add. There's a hilarious. I follow a couple of through Marcos, of course. I follow a couple of like black meme and black joke pages. Like. Black humor and African American, not dark. So one of them was, "What would you do if you won
dark humor?" I see. I was like, "Wait, you already said." Oh, I got
African American humor. Yeah. So one of them was like, "What would you do if you won the lottery?" And this guy's like, "I'm gonna have to nut first because I need a clear head to make really good decisions." I was like, "Jack off! I gotta jack off."
It's so true. It's so true.
Amazing. Like they give you the money and you're like, "I'm gonna be right back." Just go in the bathroom, come out. You're like, okay, I'm going to set up an investment portfolio, do all the right shit. Otherwise, I'm just buying hookers and hookers and hookers.
Yeah, exactly. It's so true.
Yeah. All right. Finally, Einherjar, hey, gets his Viking sword back. Hey, Doc.
How slowly do you think he pronounces it? I'm imagining him being like, "Oh, yes, my name is Einherjar.
And you've got to say it accurately, otherwise you hate Iceland or Norway or Finland." I love everything about the Nordic peoples. And I could hear them talk both in their English with their accent or in their native language for hours on end uninterrupted. James, remember me, you, and Mel went to Finland and we watched like 5 hours of Finnish television. We had no idea what they were saying. It's the greatest 5 hours of my life.
And it was I forgot the guy's name was Magnus Samuelsson making the fish. That was like the highlight of the
trip. It took him 3 hours to make.
Like several days too. Like he had to come back to get to that fish. He was just like, "This is bullshit. I thought I was on a cooking show. We're gonna eat or what?"
All right. Einherjar asks, "Hey docs, it seems like you do not condone overhead barbell press as a side delt movement. Could you elaborate on why? I have heard you briefly explain why this is, but I think in some cases it provides a good side delt stimulus despite the fatigue. For me, when I do overhead press the 5-10 range, I get a massive pump in my front delts, side delts, and traps. Although it was quite fatiguing, it seems that it would have a high raw stimulus magnitude and thus be worth the fatigue for individuals that are not insanely strong at overhead press like Dr. Mike. Am I onto something? Absolutely you are. If it really hits your side delts and it doesn't fatigue you a ton, it's fucking golden. The problem is on average, it is the front delts incredibly well for people. It's the triceps pretty well. It just doesn't do a whole lot of side delt activity for most folks. I almost never get a side delt pump from overhead pressing. And most people don't get anything that's notable. And on the stimulus to fatigue ratio, if you're doing something like lateral raises, especially super arm lateral raises, the stimulus is better for the side delts. And the fatigue is like, I don't know, like a 10th or something like that. Like it's not even close. But if it works for you, oh my God, we do not condone it, or we do not condone it at all. Do it, do it, do it. We just don't want people to think that it's a staple movement they have to do. Because like James, you know how people get to like shoulder day. I start out with overhead press. I move on to laterals. I finish with upright rows every day. Like,
Yeah.
why are you overhead pressing? And if they experiment with not doing it, a lot of times they're like, oh my God, like my bench press went up, my skull crushers went up because my triceps aren't tired, my shoulders hurt less, and my side delts are bigger. So for many people, probably most, overhead barbell press is probably not great. But if it's great for you, hey, Einherjar, fucking do it up.
Yeah, it's very much reminds me of like the deadlift, where for beginners and intermediates, it's a great movement, and then at some point you kind of have to start making trade-offs. So the one that like comes to mind right off the bat is like the overlap with like tricep training, where it's like it's enough where it's actually fatiguing your triceps to the point where maybe you couldn't do other more robust tricep training on a different day. I run into that myself, and that's just a length because I have long
Especially
arms,
with
so it's a
joint
lot of
stuff,
tricep.
James. Think
Joint
about your
stuff for
shoulder joints
sure.
and your elbows. You're like, ah, man, I would skull crush XYZ, but I'm beat up from shoulder day. Like, what the fuck would you want to do that?
And then another thing too is like, so at some point you do get, stronger at your overhead pressing movements. And then you're like, okay, well, if I want to do it with a barbell, the most stable way to do it is sitting. But that setup is like a huge pain in the ass for a lot of people to get a good setup on that. So you go, okay, well, let me try doing it standing. And then if you do it standing, it's inherently unstable. And now you're actually fatiguing like down the entire
Oh, but
kinetic
the axial
chain.
fatigue of a standing barbell press is
Right.
uniquely awful.
So then you can say, okay, well, what about dumbbells? Okay, well, it's like, okay, yeah, you can do dumbbells, but then again, it's like, wait, well, if you're doing it in the 5 to 10 rep range, you got to fucking get those like 80s up there, right?
Yeah,
And so it just starts to run into like a lot of practical limitations once you kind of become more intermediately trained. It's not that you can't do it. Like if you can do it in a way that doesn't, like for me, setting up an overhead press, either dumbbell or barbell, it's just not worth the fuss because I could just do something else with much less fuss. And maybe less systemic spillover or muscle spillover. So if you can do it, that's great. I think most people get to a point that we're talking about where the trade-offs of doing it just aren't as good anymore, just like a deadlift.
100%. Another really quick thing is a lot of the side delt activation comes when you're pushing your head through and pushing the bar back.
Yeah, true.
And when you're standing, that's the best way to do it. But the standing is crazy axial fatigue. If you sit down to press, a lot of times because you're sitting to press, you can't throw the bar back anymore. And then it's just more front delt and less side delt anyway. So it's kind of like, look, if you have front delt weakness, overhead pressing is the fucking god king exercise of front delts. If nothing even comes close, just do overhead presses and you'll have enormous front delts. But if it's your side delts you want to hit, there's just so many options that are better. Which is why it's funny because I have literally with me bragging, I have a world class overhead press, and I'm one of the guys that says I shouldn't do it if you're a bodybuilder, and it's fucking weird. Like, why wouldn't I say you should do it? I did it for years and years, just get better at it, and I got way bigger shoulders just doing more lateral raises. And it's kind of like, well, that's kind of a wussy thing. It's like if the world's like one of the world's best squatters was like, I don't squat much to get my quads bigger. I'm actually just doing hack squats and leg presses now. You'd be like, oh, that's a shitty thing to hear from that guy. But it's just when it's true, it's true.
Yeah, totally. And one thing I noticed when we were traveling, and this is another one of those kind of setup issues. Sorry, this is such like a stupid example, but it's true. When you get used to doing like an overhead press, especially like if it's a standing one, and then you travel somewhere that has like a slightly different gym floor, it's like a squishy floor, and now your session is just completely ruined because you just have no idea how much weight you're supposed to use. That shit happen. I know it sounds dumb, but you're like, okay, I'm pressing 155 for 8, and then you go to another gym and it's like now I'm doing like 115, and it feels awkward as fuck because the floor is different. Like just stupid issues like that come up.
What about a fucking seated rack setup where it's either too far behind you,
Oh my
or
God.
too far forward, and you either hitting it when you come up, or you're like, I can't unrack 225.
The ones that are
behind me,
the 8 feet, it's like, who did this? If I can't reach it, who is going to get it?
At least half of all exercise equipment is made by people in training. It's one of the reasons why I love Arsenal equipment so much. They don't always make the best equipment, almost always. A couple other pieces, I'm like, who made this? But they make such good equipment that you can tell they all lift. And the guys that design equipment lift, and you can tell you're like, this was made by people who lift weights.
Yeah.
Like, this is a fucking awesome piece of equipment because it's designed to be used. Some equipment, like, I don't mean to call it out. It's just been my experience, especially the older models. The newer stuff is better. Have you ever used Techno Gym, James,
Oh,
especially in Europe?
yes.
It's like, who made this?
This.
Bullshit. The handles are like thicker than fucking God's dick. It's like, am I supposed to have straps that are 8 feet long? Well, why are we here? What is going on? Like,
Yes.
their assisted pull-up machine, the way your back naturally pulls, actually torques sideways into the machine. So you end up just going, ugh. You generate a shitload of friction. And the way to move the machine most smoothly is like this movement you would never do in your life. You're like, okay, they never tested this on human beings, clearly.
Yeah. No, there's always going to be some sneakers. The one that always get me is the ones, I don't remember what brand. It's the ones that are like gyroscopic, that the machine moves around while you're doing it. Hoist. Yes.
The hoist makes them moist.
Yeah. Some people they're like, oh, this one's great. For me, it's like always a distraction. And I'm always like, what the fuck is this? What am I doing?
For me, it's piece by piece. The hoist chest press, mostly because it allows a really deep stretch. It's just wonderful, magical, miracle machine. Having nothing to do with the fact that it moves, by the way. It's just a deep stretch. But they're like seated row. It moves purposelessly, I might add. But the handles are literally thicker than this fucking microphone. They're like enormous. And I'm like,
why?
My fucking Versa grips around these.
Why?
Like, what am I supposed on a pulling device? This is insane.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that was it for this one. Yeah.
11 questions because Sam got an extra one.
Oh, very good. Let's see. I don't think I have any housekeeping stuff, folks. I just finished Mass Effect Legendary Edition, and I am in a show hole. My God, it's like 100 hours of gameplay, and then it comes to like a big climax. If you guys haven't checked it out,
is it worth it?
It's one of the best like sci-fi universes. It's like the gameplay is just like third person shooter, kind of like Star Warsy kind of stuff, but it's the story. The story's so good. It's 3 games. Each game your character makes decisions, and those decisions carry across each game, and you can get very distinct play experiences across all 3 games depending on what you do. They do kind of all come to a similar ending. Man, is it good. So if you guys haven't checked out Massive, I mean, that came out when like we were undergrads in college, and they just re-released it. It's fucking good. It's fucking
guys. Real. Just by the way, a little insight into our personal lives you probably don't want to know. One of my favorite things to do, myself and another friend of ours who will go unnamed, we like to get unreal high on edibles. Marijuana is legal in the states in which we are, and watch James play video games. And I swear to God, man, I'm like in this other world. I'm in the game.
Yeah.
And there's one game. Which one was the C game? What was it called?
Subnautica.
Subnautica. It's like these aliens built this essentially artificial planet, and it's all like underwater, and like you discover these alien artifacts. And every time remember we discovered like by we I mean you discovered like that the sea was actually artificial because it had like a vent of water flowing into it, like at the bottom of the ocean. When you discovered that, I was sitting there high as fuck. I was like, oh my God. I was so blown away. It was worth 100% of all that time.
I got pissed at that game because I'm like at this point where I have like this giant fucking like submarine, and I have to go get the like lava crystals, and there's a fucking like Krakow lich that's cock blocking me from the lava crystals, and I can't figure it out. And I was like, fuck this game.
To see if nerds have figured out how to beat him.
I gave up on it. It was one of those where I threw in the towel. I was pissed. I was like, fucking Krakow lich. God damn it.
I take back everything I said about our video game relationship.
You would like Mass Effect. It's basically like it's like playing Game of Thrones because it's long. I mean, it's like 100 hours of gameplay collectively. So it's like you're like basically playing a movie or a show. It's amazing.
My attention span is done after like 2 fights on Tekken 10.
Like, and I'm done. That was great.
Anyway, all right. That's it. Any announcements? Any fun things? We have some announcements in a few weeks to make, but we'll make those then.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that's it for this one, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you upvote those questions that you like. Always check for Henrik. He's a consistent deliverer on those questions. Yep. You see question that you like, just hit the like, and we'll see that they get upvoted. And if you have a question that is not in the mix, go ahead and drop it in, and we'll see if we can get to it. I think that's it for this one. We're going to sign off.
Other than asking questions next time, why don't you guys vote on if you think I'm naked while doing this webinar here.
He's going to stand up as soon as I hit stop recording. We'll find out. All right. We'll see you guys next time.